Information management is a key to power and success in academic life. In high school, most of you relied primarily upon textbooks to provide you with the information you needed to know for your classes. But in college, you're going to be much more dependent upon a major research library. For your term papers, for the research assignments that you're given, for the speeches that you will do in classes, you'll be expected to go to the library to know how to find information. And those of you that are successful in finding critical, important information are those who will succeed in college.
Debate is like a basic science is to technology. You can't build a good hammer, for example, unless you know something about metallurgy, you know what steel to use, what metal, what pieces to put into it, what kind of stress ratio this hammer's going to need to withstand. Debate teaches you basic skills, basic information processing skills that really teach you how to think in a lot of ways and how to learn things and apply that information. Those kind of basic skills are something that you can apply in any field. If you go on to medical school, you go to law school, engineering, any liberal arts field, especially liberal arts fields, it teaches you how to learn and process information. It's something that you can use in any class. I can't think of one that you couldn't apply it in.
It helps one to organize their thoughts. It helps somebody to understand how to break down a thought or a fact to its root, and then to attack that root and to understand it at a very basic level so that you can understand the whole of the argument. It allows people to understand things. It helps your analytical thinking skills and your critical thinking skills as well.
Well, debate helps with computers in a lot of ways. First of all, when you go to the library now, everything is computerized. So you have to be able to know how to use the Lewis and how to find the books and the information you need. And also there's a lot of other computer databases that help you with newspapers and magazines. The research skills that you learn can be applied to every classroom experience because you know how to go to the library and how to use the tools in the library to your advantage, how to do everything quick and without having to wander around not knowing what you're doing.
When organizing research for debates, we use large tubs that hold all of the information that we've gotten from the library, and then we subdivide those, and we carry several of them around with us that contain a lot of different information all on one general subject area, but it allows us to isolate particular facts that we need to pull out specifically, and they are rather heavy.
Well, we've chosen a debate because a debate will show the process by which a piece of evidence is used to support an argument. The particular format that we're going to use will consist of a team debate where there will be a constructive speech or an opening statement by each of 4 speakers. That opening statement is then followed by a rebuttal speech by each of the 4 speakers. The tape that you will see will only indicate part of that process. That is, we'll have only 2 people debating, but there will be an opening statement by each speaker and then a closing statement by each speaker. The topic which will be debated today calls for a ban on the use of capital punishment. The arguments which you will hear presented by the 2 debaters do not necessarily reflect their own personal points of view, but are rather a reflection of the arguments which are found in the literature. The first speaker is Dawn Gibson. Dawn is a sophomore debater here at Wayne State University, and she is in her 2nd year of college debate.
Two recent films, The Chamber and Dead Man Walking, vividly told the stories of men condemned to die as a result of this nation's unique and brutal practice of capital punishment. Because I believe that there is no rational justification for a civilized nation to kill even its most errant citizens, I propose that the U.S. Supreme Court should overrule its decision in Gregg v. Georgia and declare all forms of capital punishment cruel and unusual punishment, and that all sections of state and federal statutes requiring capital punishment are unconstitutional and therefore null and void. Initially, I wish to observe contention 1. The use of the death penalty is widespread. 38 states impose the death penalty, and its use is becoming increasingly more frequent. The Dayton Daily News, July 3, 1995. 5 offenders were put to death in 1993 alone, and 21 in 1994. There were 38 executions in 1993. This year, the count reached 30 before the end of June, and the backlog is enormous. Death rows across the country hold about 3,000 condemned prisoners, the most ever. In spite of the death penalty's increasing use, I believe that the practice is unjustifiable. Contention 2. Capital punishment is unfair and brutalizing. 3 arguments support this. First, subpoint A. The law is applied unfairly. Clay, Democratic representative from Missouri, in 1990. The callous attitude about racial and economic disparity is pervasive among judges at all levels. During the past 50 years, of all persons executed in this country, 54% have been black and 45% poor whites. If a person is both a minority and impoverished, his chances of execution following conviction of a capital offense is more than 4 times as great as a middle-class white. The unfairness of capital punishment is not limited to racial minorities and the poor. It's potentially unfair to all of us because it's not infallible. Subpoint B, innocent people are executed. Capital punishment relies on human judgments, and our judgments are prone to error. Amnesty International, the prestigious human rights organization, details this problem in its 1989 report. In 1987, a study presented evidence that 350 people convicted of capital crimes in the USA between 1900 and 1985 were innocent of the crimes charged. In most cases, the discovery of new evidence resulted in acquittal, pardon, commutation of the sentence, or dismissal of the charges, often years after the original conviction. Some prisoners escaped execution by minutes. 23 were executed. Perhaps the most surprising and disturbing reason for the rejection of the death penalty is its overall effect on society. Subpoint C. The death penalty brutalizes society, creating a cycle of violence. William Bowers, director of Northeastern University Center for Applied Research, explains, studies suggest that executions provoke more homicides than they prevent. The California study found a homicide drop 2 days immediately following the execution, but it was nullified by the rise in the preceding 2 days and outstripped by a further rise in the following week. These studies do not rule out the possibility that some homicides are deterred by executions. They simply indicate that the brutalizing effect tends to be longer in duration and stronger in impact than any deterrent effect that may occur, and the net effect is brutalization rather than deterrence. Fortunately, there is a more fair, less brutal alternative. Contention 3. Life without parole is a better alternative. Badeau, professor at Northeastern University in 1987. Feasibility in these respects is demonstrated by the decades of experience in the jurisdictions with no punishment more severe than imprisonment, beginning with states such as Michigan and including the entire nation between 1967 and 1977. It's time to stop the brutal and inhumane practice of dead men walking to the chamber.
The second speaker is Chris Levine. Chris is a senior debater at Wayne State University, and last year he was the second-ranked speaker at the National Debate Tournament.
America is at war with crime. As a nation in which 1 in 10 people can expect to become a victim of violent crime, we must ask ourselves as a nation, is it really what we want to cede more ground to the rapists and murderers of society? Built-in protections can assure that the death penalty is both just and not applied discriminately. But once society unwisely bans the death penalty, there is nothing that will be able to replace the unique retributive and deterrent effects that the death penalty has in society. My first argument against banning the death penalty is the notion that the death penalty is necessary for retribution of society. Subpoint A. Execution is imperative to fulfill the goals of retribution. Johnson, a former editor of the New Statesman, notes in Opposing Viewpoints 1986, precisely because it inspires awe and even horror, no other human act of justice is more likely to bring home to the public the peculiar atrocity of the crime to which it is the judicial response. To execute a criminal is to say loudly and vividly, this creature has done a thing so dreadful that we must inflict on him the supreme penalty in our power. Subpoint B. Retribution is key to uphold the sanctity of life. Pekulak, a professor of philosophy at Clark University, notes in Opposing Viewpoints 1991, not only is the death penalty for deliberate killings of a fellow human permitted, but it is approved and encouraged, and for any government that attaches at least as much value to the life of an innocent victim as to a deliberate murder, it is ethically imperative. Dawn notes 3 reasons why the death penalty should be banned. Her first argument is that the death penalty is applied in a racist fashion. This is untrue for 2 reasons. First, The statistics do not support her claim. The death penalty is not aggregately racist. This is to say that African Americans commit 48% of the crimes, but are responsible for only 42% of the inmates on death row. The Rocky Mountain News notes on July 28, 1994. Some of the data, far from supporting the proposition that blacks suffer from discrimination in the criminal justice system, point to the reverse. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the percentage of inmates on death row are black is 42%. It's far lower than the percentage of black criminals who are charged with murder, which is 48%. My second argument is that researchers seek out racism in the death penalty when it is not actually there. More than once, they've changed their position in order to support their claims with the facts. Her second argument is that the death penalty sometimes kills innocent victims. I have three arguments to this. The first is the evidence is biased. The report that she cites notes that 35 people have already been executed who are innocent, but that includes people who are blatantly guilty, such as the Rosenbergs, who sold atomic secrets to the Soviet Union in the height of the Cold War. Clearly a crime which they were convicted for, and no evidence has existed to repudiate that fact. Second, her evidence exaggerates the scope of the problem that exists today. It cites evidence from 1990 to 1985. While it's true that the death penalty might have had flaws earlier, new technologies can ensure that the death penalty is not used to kill innocent people today. Techniques such as DNA testing and aggravating and mitigating circumstances can ensure that the guilty are guilty and the innocent are let free. My final argument is that on balance, the death penalty saves more innocent lives than it takes. I'll win below that the death penalty can deter a murderer. Even one person a year is more than all of the people that Dawn can claim the death penalty has killed of innocents in the entire history of the death penalty. Her third argument is that the death penalty brutalizes society. First, this argument is ridiculous. It's like saying that imprisonment would encourage kidnapping or fining someone for committing a crime would justify burglary. This is Vandenheg, John M. Olin Professor of Jurisprudence and Public Policy, Fordham University, and the Harvard Law Review in 1986. Although all punishments are meant to be unpleasant, it is seldom argued that they legitimize the unlawful imposition of identical unpleasantness. Imprisonment is not thought to legitimize kidnapping, neither are fines thought to legitimize robbery. The difference between murder and execution, or between kidnapping and imprisonment, is that the first is unlawful and undeserved. The second is lawful and deserved punishment for an unlawful act. Secondly, the crime spike of the 60s and 70s proves that the death penalty deters. The same time that the Supreme Court handed down their decision in Furman versus Georgia, crime rates rose. When they reinstated the death penalty, crime rates dropped. This is Dadisman, Human Rights, Spring 1993. Corey points to a crime spike in the 60s and 70s that resulted in a clamor for government action. The statistics leveled off in the 1980s, he added, when many states reinstated the death penalty. The citizens clearly are concerned about crime, he said, and the deterrence aspect of the death penalty cannot be overlooked. Someone who murders innocent people give up their right to life. Merely locking that person away is not proportional to the crime they commit. There is only one answer to the Jeffrey Dahmers, the Ted Bundys, and the Charles Mansons of society. That is only one just answer. Execution.
Chris advances a lot of rhetoric about our war with crime, but that doesn't answer the evidence that the death penalty is on balance a bad idea. His first argument is that we should have retribution against the criminals, but I think that life in prison is enough retribution. It's not a nice place to stay, and if it's true that these people are terrible and that they do all these violent things, that would certainly allow some type of retribution. And additionally, the concept of retribution feeds into the idea of the cycle of violence advanced by William Bowers. More violence after violence will just create more violence. His next argument deals with my claim that the death penalty is racist, and he says that that's not true, but that's moreover the analysis of the data in terms of the type of crimes committed failed to account for racial differences. This is Clay from the original speech. The data showed that the type of murder did not account for the racial differences in the probability of receiving the death penalty. For both a felony and a non-felony homicides, the same differences by race, both the offender and the victim appeared. His next argument is off of my argument that innocent people are executed. He asserts that the Rosenbergs were in that number, and whether or not that's true, that is irrelevant. They are only one case. But what's important is that there are 350 people that were innocent and that they almost died. He has nothing to refute that. And additionally, any one innocent person being executed is one too many. His last arguments are about the cycle of violence, but he doesn't refute any of my specific studies from the state of California that indicates that for every execution there is a small drop the day of the execution, but after that there is much more violence, and that gets rid of any deterrence value. And his last arguments deal with life without parole. Life without parole is certainly a sentence enough. I wouldn't want to spend my whole life, 50 years in jail. That's certainly enough punishment. There's no reason why we'd have to do anything else.
Dawn's compassion for the guilty is admirable. What's lacking is her compassion for the victims of the people who are murdered by those people. Let me tell you a story about Leonard Lake and Charles Inge, who murdered 25 or more males and females in a specially constructed cinder block bunker located near Sacramento in a mountain retreat that was used as a torture chamber. The goal was to seek out sexually attractive females who would then be used as sex slaves, subjected to sexual torture, and often killed. When investigators went to the secluded ranch where the bunker was located, they found a sign posted on a vehicle that read, "If you love something, set it free. If it doesn't come back, hunt it down and kill it." Entries found in one of Lake's diaries indicated that some of the men brought to the ranch may have been used as game animals and hunted down and killed. The perfect woman was totally controlled, Lake wrote, a woman who does exactly what she's told and nothing else. The diaries revealed graphic illustrations of sexual abuse, torture, murder, kidnapping, and cremation. Police found several tapes and pictures of women being sexually abused and tortured. Some of the tapes showed Lake and Inge raping and sodomizing their victims. When the two had finished, they executed them. It appears that the victims may have been then cut up into pieces with power saws and tree trimmers found at the site and placed into metal drums for incineration. The remaining bones were then pulverized and buried. Police found 45 pounds of bone at the site. For people like this, life without parole isn't the solution. Only the death penalty can tell society that for serial murderers or just someone who kills one person, the crime you've committed is too much. Only the death penalty can send the symbol of retribution, not revenge, but justice for what they've done. Dawn's arguments are nothing more than liberalism. Her argument about racism ignores the fact that they've consistently changed their position to support the facts when they found out that more whites were on death row. Her evidence on innocence is from 1900 to 1985, overlooking the fact that between 1974 and 1985 hardly anyone was executed, meaning all of her examples are before there were procedural due process protections. And her argument about brutalization doesn't stand up to the facts. If that's true, then life without parole is just as likely to encourage kidnapping and murder as anything else. The best deterrent is death. Let's teach the people who do wrong in society that what they did is wrong. And the only way to do that is with the death penalty. Thank you.
Well, besides the schooling ideas, a lot has been able to help me in job applications and in the workplace because it helps with the communication, it helps with researching, and it also looks really good on your resume that you know how to do everything. And the most important thing, it really gives you a sense of poise and also like maturity, because you have to be able to think on your feet, and you have to be able to hold yourself in a manner, even though when you're put under a lot of stress and pressure, and also by the opponents, a lot of times it gets really tense, and you just have to be able to keep your calm and
when you apply that knowledge that you learned in the library to a debate round, you can apply it to really any situation in life. You need to know know things about what you're doing. You need to know why it is that things are true. I mean, information, knowledge really is power. It's cliche, but it's true. In a classroom situation, a lot of the times, in a lot of your classes, especially peace and conflict or even English, in really any situation where you need to write a paper, you need to give a presentation, not only do you know how to get the information from the library and how to internalize it and make an argument based on that information, a lot of times you're going to know that information anyway because you've already researched it for debate. A lot of times when I had to write a paper in peace and conflict or something like that, I get a lot of the information out of my old debate files that I've already researched. You can go and update that and you've already got a good paper already set.